All right, welcome everyone. This is Juan Soto, Microsoft Access MVP and leader of the Access with SQL Server group at AccessUserGroups.org. I'd like to welcome everyone here, and those of you who are watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, AccessUserGroups.org, as well as you can see future meetings and our calendar, chapter calendar. Sign up for multiple chapters using our new and improved website. I'd like to get started with some news regarding Microsoft Access. Those of you who have been bitten lately by a bug in version 2021, 2201, excuse me, version 2201 of Office 365. You've probably been affected by this bug if you're on the current channel, and if you have, Microsoft has released an update, which is the latest news. But if you still have issues, I'm going to paste a copy of a blog post we have at accessexperts.com so that you can follow the link there. Now, one of the things I just want to make a note here, several things. I want to, first of all, I want to editorialize tonight's meeting at the beginning of the meeting. So, George, I know you were going to record this and edit, so I'm going to leave it up to your discretion if you want to cut this out of the video. But one of the things that I want to talk about is it's been several cases now, several months now, last year and this year, where we've had bugs introduced that disable functionality in Microsoft Access. And when you have a bug like this serious as the one we have in 2201, it does impact a whole wide range of companies and users worldwide. I mean, it just does. Coupled with the fact that you've got people who insist that Microsoft Access is dead and it's just not worth it, and I don't know why people keep using it, and you hear all these kind of things. And it's just a disappointing for me to see these issues happen. Now, as you know, as an Access, well, if you don't know, I'll tell you, as an Access MVP, I have direct access to the team in Redmond who work with Access. And so I'm one of those voices that raises our hands and say, guys, you've got an issue here with this version. Please let me know how we're going to fix this. And, it has not gone unsaid that we have had discussions with them about these ongoing issues with Access being impacted. I mean, it's just a pain in the butt. Now, this 2201 was due to a improvement to the security of VBA to fix a vulnerability. And so if you're Microsoft, that's a tough choice. A potential problem for clients worldwide to being hacked, or do I send it out right away, right, to avoid that particular scenario? And so as Microsoft needs to make that weight against one or the other, and they're always going to, I'll tell you right now, they're always going to favor security, right, over issues with the product. They want to make sure people are safe and secure. Now, one of the early workarounds for that bug, and you just joined us, I left you a link to our chat window. Welcome, Cesardo. Uh, we um, we have customers who were not impacted by this issue because of two things. Number one, they are not on the current channel, and I can't stress this enough. You always want to make sure your customers and yourself are on the semi-annual channel, not on the current channel. And so the link I posted on in the chat window is going to talk to you about. There's a PDF there. If you see that, click here to download the PDF, and it shows you how to change to the semi-annual channel. Now, we have a tenant at Microsoft. Tenant means you have your domain right at Microsoft and you use it for email and Office 365. So our tenant is itimpact.com. So instead of following the instructions in the PDF, what we need to do is modify our policies in order to force things to be on the semi-annual channel. Now, in the past, my employees and I have been dog food, right, used as dog food for the current channel. But it's hard, when you're on the cutting edge of Microsoft Access and you want to be on the cutting edge. Even though I've told my customers to be on the semi-annual channel, it's hard to, when a bug like this can come by and impacts productivity. It just does. A lot of our employees, they work remotely. And so one of the first things that we do when we start with new customers, make sure they're on the semi-annual channel. And we had an instance of that reverting back to the current channel. And so we have a ticket open in Microsoft to find out why is it that it's reverting back to the current channel? And so I'll keep you guys posted when we hear back from them. We're working with engineers directly at Microsoft about that.
Okay, Juan, it's true then that this update did in fact change settings, including that?
Well, we noticed the channel change because, we're really proud of ourselves. We're working with our clients, and then we see clients down the current channel. What's this? I thought you guys said, I thought, first of all, we're like, come on, guys, we told you to change this semi-annual. And the next thing you hear from them is, well, we did. We did. We followed your instructions many months ago, and now we're current. So we are working with the team at Redmond, specifically the office team, not the Access team, but the office team,
Yeah,
on seeing if why it's that happening.
yeah. But I also fielded one question on one of the user groups where the OP was very adamant that the same thing happened with their trusted locations, that it was turned off, and so I don't know if that's something that you can use in your discussions with him, but that would be really worrisome to me that default settings are being restored for
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable. Alphonse, welcome. So it's uncomfortable really because the fact of the matter is now you've got an ecosystem that's far beyond Access, right? In the old days when you brought Access Office on a CD, and before that the floppy drives, floppies. You basically, you had access, and it was rarely impacted by anything because, first of all, there was no internet, right? They weren't intertwined as much as they are now with the other Office products, and so it's gotten to the point where, and we see this as Access developers, right? We build some really complex solutions for clients around the world at IT Impact. And one of our clients, sometimes our client says, Juan, when you fix something over here, something breaks over there, and they get very upset about that, and understandably so. And I tried to explain this. Look, this is a very complex system, and so so first of all, I'm sorry that I damaged this part of it. I'm gonna go and fix it, but keep in mind that this is a very complex system. It's got a lot of moving parts. It's all interconnected. In the same way with Office, a lot of people don't realize that Office is highly compartmentalized, right? In other words, the Microsoft Access team is responsible for only Access. It's not responsible for the VBA. It's not responsible for security. It's not responsible for deploying Office. It's not responsible for this. It's not responsible for documentation. It's not responsible. Those guys, the team I work with at Microsoft, are only responsible for just Access. They have no purview about anything else in Office. They have no purview as to what other people are doing that might impact Access. But yet they feel the brunt of the wrath, right? From first from MVPs like myself, and then from the general public. So it's a tough position to be in, And I'm a fanboy, like as you can imagine, of the Access team, but it's tough sometimes. It's tough. I'm like, come on, guys, why is it we're having problems with with this rollout, right, or with this bug? So it's important to realize that when you're dealing with a product like Access, you have to broaden your perception, if you will, of what is Access and how it interacts with all these other parts. And you get all these different teams, and you can't blame them when they go and they work on security first mindset because that's what I want them to do. I don't want to be hacked. So I'm glad that they're doing security first mindset. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is I came across this video about a new Microsoft product called Microsoft Loop. Have anybody here heard about it? Microsoft Loop. Interesting new features coming to Teams. So I'm gonna put that video, YouTube video, in the comments. I was watching it. Now this gentleman who's doing this video, his name is Kevin Stratford. Very good YouTube channel. So I urge you to subscribe. He was a former Microsoft employee until a few months ago. Ends up resigning from Microsoft to go because while he was at Microsoft, he was doing his videos. And this guy's got an amazing talent to be able to explain things simply. George, have you heard of this channel, Kevin's channel, before?
No, I'm not aware of it. I'll go look it up though.
Yeah, so I posted the link on in the chat here, and actually that link is for my accessexpert.com. Let me see if I can give you the link again for this YouTube channel, this particular video. Now, I've said this before in our meetings, but I'll say this again. Microsoft introduces on average 600 new features a year. Now, think about it. That's almost more than two new features a day. And so it's really hard to catch, to really hard to stay on top of these things, right? And believe it or not, I talked to an Microsoft MVP, and I'm Microsoft VP, and he's telling me, Juan, I like to do more releases, more features, but my customers tell me, no, this is too much. You're overwhelming us with these new features. So I just pasted a YouTube channel there, a YouTube video, excuse me, with Kevin Stewart. And so, they would love to do more because, think about it. They've got thousands of employees worldwide, and all they're doing is knocking out these new features. Now, this Microsoft Loop is pretty interesting because it allows you to embed tables, paragraphs into discussions and teams and emails and spreadsheets and documents, and whoever updates it everywhere, right? Which is pretty neat. I think that's something that I'm gonna start playing with. I have to enable that in my tenants in order to be able to play with those things. So welcome, Dale. Thanks for joining us. So that is that. There's lots of features coming, and they're just going to be coming, keep coming. And I like this guy Kevin Stratford because he's very concise and is very down to earth, and it does help me understand these latest stuff. Now, I just recently upgraded to Windows 11. Anybody else made the plunge to Windows 11?
Nope.
All right. Well, look, the fact is that I'm enjoying it, right? There's several things that I like about it. The multiple desktops is great with different desktop backgrounds, but it does get a little bit getting used to. But so far, I'm liking it. It's pretty neat. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with tonight's topic. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I've actually got two demos here. And let's see, screen one. So let me know if when you see my screen. I think you do. All right. So here is a concept that I worked on many moons ago, back when I had hair in my head, about menus. So I created this simple form. All there is just this form on this database file. And remind me to upload this file before we end. I want you guys to have it. And here, when I click on this button, it launches the store menu. When I go over to products, it launches the product menu, and I click on support. It clicks the support menu. Now, I've got a poster. When I posted about this meeting online, somebody says, well, why not just use the menu bar for that? Well, yeah, you could create a menu bar up here and create a custom ribbon for that, but that's a pain in the butt sometimes. Sometimes you need a context menu based on that particular form. You want to replicate something like this, like the web, right? The website, when you go to a website, you'll see this methodology of cascading menus, right? The only problem is that you'll see the design here in a second, but the only problem is when you have submenus, really does not lend itself to that. But I like this example because, number one, it allows me to demonstrate some fundamental concepts in tonight's discussion, especially for people who are just starting to access. I want you to listen closely regarding the code and learn why is it that this works so well. All right, so I'll put this in design view. Now, basically, I believe these are buttons too. Yeah, so these are all buttons. The ones underneath the menu are all hidden. And these main buttons here, I believe, do not have a tag property. No, they don't. So notice that the tag property is empty. But the ones under the store have a tag property called S, right? So I use the letter S. All of these have a tag property. The one under P have a tag property of P, as you can see here. And over here, let me see which one I used over here under support. I used the letter T, right? You could have used numbers. You can use whatever you like. You can actually use the menu name if you like. Now, the tag property, as a reminder, the tag property is exactly what it is. It's for the program, right? It has no significance in access. You can write whatever you want in here, numbers, letters. This is for you. And so this is a great example of how to use the tag property to make your life easier. So let's go ahead and look at the code. So I'm going to click on store, and I'm going to go to the event tab. And notice it's calling a function. Web menu, because, web menu, because that's where I get the concept from the web. It passes along as an argument, s. So in order to see this function, now remember you can use function as events in your code, but there's a couple of caveats right here. Number one is, I believe the function, George can correct me on this, I believe the function has to be in the forms module in order to work, or maybe it can be
Yes.
anywhere in the product.
It has to be a function. I'm
It
not
has
sure.
now, does that function have to be in that module, or can it be anywhere in the database?
I don't know.
Usually we put stuff where it's closely used, right? In other words, if I have this web menu on this form, I want to put the function on the form. Now, I don't want to put it in a separate module because, number one, it makes it harder to debug things and to find them, right? So we want to make sure we place things. That's a general concept. So nugget number one I'm getting for you guys is place things that are close to where they're being used. So I'm using this function on this form, so I'm placing it in this form. So I'm going to click on the View Code button here. And I'm going to bring this over to this monitor. Can you see my monitor? Can you see the code?
Yes.
The code window? All right, great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to put this over here. Now, the way I shift this over is I hold on the window key and then right? So I use window left for the code and window key right for this. And I'm going to minimize the database window, and I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to run the form. Okay, so the store menu passes along that S here, right, in the function. And then there's an object defined as dbm obj as object. Now, remember, if you don't define an object, if you don't define a variable, right? So if I just say dim obj, number one, I would get an error message up here because I have an option explicit. And number two, when I do this, it's considered a variant variable, right? So we don't want to use variants because they use more memory. We find this in an object. And then I'm using the controls collection of the form. Now, this is actually an interview question I use at IT Impact when I interview programmers. I talk to them about this specific example. How would you loop through all the objects on the form? But before even that, I ask them, what is a collection? Right? And then after I ask the question, now in the interview, if you don't know the answer, I like to give you the answer. Right? I'm not there to do gotcha moments and all that. So I tell them, it says, look, I don't expect you to know every answer. If you don't know the question in my interview, just say so, and I'll give you the answer. That's right. So the first question I ask him is, okay, what is a collection? And I'm looking for a collection is a grouping of similar objects like command buttons and forms and tables, right? And then the next question is, what collection exists on the forms for itself? And that's the controls collection. That's another second answer to your questions. Now we refer to the current form with the me, right? And me.controls would be the controls collection. So what I'm doing is I'm iterating to every control on that form by using OBJ. Now, if I'm working with buttons, I could have done what here? Instead of object, I could have defined it as what? Command button, right? I could have said, okay, you know what? I'm going to define this command button, and then I can, I get specific command button properties and events that show up, right? By being more specific with this OBJ, then when I go with OBJ dot, it shows me the properties and methods of command buttons. But the problem is that controls collection has everything for the form, not just these command buttons, but also this logo, right? And so you're iterating through all those controls. And this logo, I believe, is image control. So in order to avoid issues with this looping, I just use object, which is more generic, but still better than variant. And then I say, okay, if the tag property equals the parameter, in which case the s, then I make the object visible. Otherwise, else if not obj tag equal nothing, then I make it false, right? So let's look at this else if, right? This else if is another inline if. So if this is, if it's not the store menu, right, it's going to go through this else if. And if that object, the obj tag is nothing, then it's going to make it visible. Now, I say nothing, but really it's not nothing. What does this double quote mean? Double quote, double quote. What is that? It's not really nothing. What is that? It's an empty what? It's an empty string, right? Because nothing is not the same thing as an empty string, right? That's something that was hard for me to understand when I first started down this journey with Access. Nothing is not the same thing as an empty string, right? Just like 0 is a number, right? 0, we're like, okay, 0 is nothing. Well, really, 0 is a number. And so you got to keep in mind that, and that makes it visible. So we're going to break this here by hovering over the mouse to the extreme left here. And I'm going to click on the store. Now, when I do this, I can hover over the parameter that's being passed, which is a share menu, is S, right? Now, to make this even more interesting, I'm going to modify this code, and I'm going to debug.print the name of the object I'm currently at. Okay, and I'm going to show the debug, the immediate window by pressing Control G. So that's nugget number 2. If you want to see the control window, the immediate window, just press Control G. So I'm going to press F8 to cycle through this. So I am on the logo. So for whatever reason, this object, Microsoft frame, unbound frame, Ole bound frame, is the first one in the collection, right? And it's not any command button. So it's not going to have anything in the tag property because I didn't put it. So that goes to the FF. And it bypasses it because the tag property is else if not obj tag equal. So in other words, if the tag is something else like the P or the T, then it's going to work. It's going to be doing that, right? Because if I come in here and I do question mark obj dot tag, I get nothing, right? And so question mark obj tag equal double quotes true, right? So it's empty string. So the tag property is empty string. That's true. And but because I have the not there, right? And I realize these if statements are really hard to read. And so one technique I do is I read it without the not, right? So I pretend I put my finger in front of the not. And I say, okay, well, if the tag was empty screen, then it makes it invisible. I don't want to make this logo invisible. So that's why it bypasses this. If it were something else, right, I could have done, now there's million ways of doing this. I could have done the length of the tag greater than 0, if length greater than 0, right? So if I could say if length len dot tag. Now, why is this dot tag work? Well, because I'm in the with statement there, and it doesn't like that, the tag property. So that's one way of doing it. And then I'm sure you guys can come up with other ways. So now I'm in the CMD store, and that doesn't have a tag property. It's not. It doesn't have to. It doesn't become invisible. Now and products. Okay, so I'm in the products menu, main menu, and that didn't hit. And now I'm and where? And it's showing up here. Let me just make sure that there you go. Now, but I'll be able to step through this. Now I'm in command 4. Right now, I did a very poor job of naming the menu items on the store. Right, so it said CMD store, uh, whatever the value of the caption property of there. So that's store home. And now I'm at command 5, and that's devices. As you can see, they're popping up here as I go through the code. All right, so I'm gonna press F5 to finish running through the code. And as you can see, my debug menu went through every command button there is on the collection. So this is very simple, right? It's using a very short piece of code to enable this menu. And instead of using the event handler of the store products and support buttons, I'm calling a function in order to put all this code in one place, which makes it easy to edit, right? It allows me to debug, easy to edit. This is the way I want my programmers to work, my programmers to do things, right? because I could have easily just copied this code and the on-click event of the main menu, each one of these main menus, store products, and so forth. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when I click on another menu, like this one, products. And so all right, let me just wipe everything off the meeting window, pressing Control A as an Apple, and then the delete key on my keyboard. And now when I press F8, it shows again, I'm back at the control, right? Because that's the first one. Now, collections and access also can be referred to using numbers or the index, right? So if, for example, if I do question mark me.controls 0.name, I would expect it to be the Olay bound 0. And that's what it is. So I can use the index value. Now notice that this particular collection starts with 0 because it's a 0-based collection. So whenever you see 0, another interview question, hint, hint. When you see 0, it's a 0-based collection there that starts with 0. Most, I think all collections start with 0. If I'm not mistaken. And yeah, so you could have done this another way. Now, why would we ever use numbers? Because we don't want to use numbers, right? We want to use the object name, right? So what we really want to do is when I refer to this object name, I want to do it this way, right? So I want to say me bang, right? And then Olay bound 0 dot visible. I'm asking if it's visible, right? So that's the way I really want to see code done by IT Impact standards. I want to use the bang notation, not me dot Olay bound, but me bang, as opposed to me dot controls, because there's another way I could have done this would have been me dot controls double quote the name of the object double quote dot name. All right, same thing. So I'm getting there the same way, either with me dot controls 0 or me bang or me dot controls the name of the object. Now, where we use every specific instance? Well, when we know the object name, we use the bang notation, right? In this case, we don't know the object name because we'll loop through the controls. We would use a 0, and I've only used this a couple of times in my career, the index of the controls, especially when I'm dealing with cross-tab queries. If I run a cross-tab query sales for 2022, I'm only going to get 2 months of sales, right? January and February. So if I have a report that's got 12 columns going across, the only first 2 months are going to be populated because assuming that sales only occur in the present time or the past, right? So if I can book a sale, for example, December now, obviously I'll have sales in December. But for my example, assuming that sales are booked either today or prior, when I run that cross-tab query, I don't know how many months I'm going to get because I got to program that report to handle 12 columns, Monday to January to December. And so in that case, I've used the index value of the headers in the report to turn them on or off, right? Or to do other things with it. What happens is when you bind the record set to a cross-tab query, you're going to have also a fields collection, right, of the record set type, and the fields collection also start with 0. So the first field of that query, which might be the value that you're doing across that query, like sales, will be 0. Then the second column in that query would be the second field would be so forth. So you can use that to be able to handle cross-tab queries. So every time you're dealing with cross-tab queries, the moral of the story, boys and girls, is you really don't know what you're getting, so you have to program for worst-case scenario. Right? In my case, when I have a January through December report, I want to buy a program for all months of the year. Anyway, so where was I? All right, so I'm going to put my cursor here, and I'm going to go through this code. Now I'm in products. Well, products is the one that was passed along, right? Because if I look at the STR menu, it was P that was done. So I'm in the products menu. And now let's see here. Now I'm in the support menu. Support menu. And now I'm command 4. So now notice that it became invisible, right? So command 4 is this guy here. Just became invisible. Why? Because the menu property of that tag, right? So if I go to the tag here, let me see if it pops up if I show it now. But if I do obj tag, it's going to say S. Yeah, S. So that's why it became invisible. It's not P. So I'm just going to run through this. Press F5, run through it. All right, and so that enables this menu here and this store menu here. Now, many of you are wondering, well, why did I bother coming to this meeting? Because I already know all this stuff, right? And so the point I wanted to make was that in order to be a great Access developer, you've got to understand the object hierarchy and the way Access object model works, right? So the Access object model starts with the type level object. What is the top level object in the Access object model? Can anybody tell me that? The top object in Access, the dog, the top dog. It's Access, right? Workspaces. You can say workspaces, a DB engine. It's Access itself. So we don't imply this here, but I could dimension dim ACC as Access, right? So that's the number one object in the hierarchy, but we never do this because we're already inside Access. Now, if I'm in Excel trying to control Access, right, I would do that, right? I would dim my object I access, and then I would dim another object as the database object and so forth. Just like when we control Excel from Access, that's what we do. We create an object for Excel, and then we create an object for the worksheet. They're two separate things, right? So the top level object in the Access is Access. But what I wanted to make sure I emphasize with you guys is the fact that you can use the object model to your advantage to become a better programmer and be more efficient in coding. Now, those of you who have been following this channel along a lot know that I seldom get into coding. I don't like doing coding because I usually only have an hour for these meetings and really don't want to get into the weeds of coding. But tonight I'm making the exception with this simple example. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to upload this file to you guys here in Webmax so you can download. So those of you who are listening on YouTube, I'm sorry you're not going to get this example. I hope that you can join us next time. When I do have these files, I will share them with you. But I like to share files to the people who show up. So let me go ahead and close this, and I'm not going to say no to that. And I'm going to locate that file and upload it to the YouTube, to the WebEx. And I'm going to figure this out. Hopefully George can help me with how to upload files to the WebEx meeting. Maybe it's up here somewhere.
I never
I've
tried.
never done that. You never tried? Okay.
No.
Let me go to the share menu. Share content, share web browser, share multimedia. All right. Share multimedia URL. To share multimedia, enter URL for the web page that contains the multimedia content. Now, that's not it. Give me a second, guys, while I figure this out.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, what?
On the share contact, there's a Windows, a file, and a whiteboard. If you click under file, I think you get a.
Share content. Okay, great. All right, great file. Okay, good. Share file. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So let me find out where that menu example is. And I'll launch Access here. Access. And that menu example is located under See Users Access OneDrive Presentation. Oh boy. Let me just quickly share a file here. Next. So now, okay. So see, all right, it's uploaded now. We're going to have to upload it to the web and then put the link to the download in the YouTube video so that, because I promised everybody this call. So you guys lucked out. If you're watching this video, you're lucked out because now you can get the file. So okay, we'll upload it later on this week, and then when George has this file ready to, you'll see in the comments there of the meeting. All right. The second example I have for you guys is I like to call spawn examples. Let me share my screen again. How many people we have on the call today, George?
Looks like 5 of us now.
5 of us. Okay. Lots
Maybe
of people,
6. Maybe 6. Yeah, 1.
Maybe 6. All right. Now, this concept of spawning, I wanted to share with you guys, is a concept where you can show multiple forms in memory, but I don't have multiple forms. In fact, if I look at the database menu, I only have two forms, the main menu and the one I'm spawning, right? So I don't have multiple forms. So let me just click on the spawn form here. So I just spawned this form, and then I'll click on spawn form again. So I have the same form I'm spawning in memory. Now I call it spawning. Some people might call it cloning. Some people might be initializing another form. But the concept here is going back to the object model is to launch the same form in memory. Why do we do this? Well, number one, if you ever had the opportunity to manage multiple forms of the same kind, it's a pain in the butt to do that, right? Before spawning, what I would do is I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these forms in the design view here as objects. And I would have a main one, and then I would just copy every time I had changed to the first one, write the code or anything like that. I had to maintain the other ones. So that who wants to go through that? Invariably, I forget, and I get error user submits a bug report that's not working. So spawning a form in memory allows you to have multiple things. I'll say, for example, an order number, right? So notice I have multiple order numbers. So I got order number 3119. I got order number 7740, right? I actually closed that one by clicking on it. And then 140 and so forth. So when you have for example, a system order entry system or order system, and you want to give the users the ability to spawn that order form so they can have 2 or 3 orders up at the same time. Now, and not every customer likes that, but that's a lot of them do, right? So, for example, if I didn't have this spawn form, right, I had just this one, order number 140. Now I'm looking at this complex order. It's got multiple sub items and multiple ship dates, and I'm in the thick of this. And somebody calls me on the blue and says, Juan, I want to talk about this form, this order number such and such, or I got this customer on the phone, they want the order status. What do I have to do if I don't have spawning? I got to close this form, go do a search, open that form, answer the question, close this one, go back, look for the search, find the original one I was in. Right? That's a pain. Who wants to go through all those steps just to answer a question, right? And so sometimes what they've done, I've seen clients do, is they spawn another version of Access. They just start Access the Access database again, and they've got 2 Access databases in memory. And one, there's like, okay, you know what? I'll just start a new instance of Access in the database, and then I'll answer that question. And then because I don't want to go through all that pain and rigmarole to be able to do that. So having multiple orders on the screen, multiple invoices, multiple customer records, it's a boon in productivity for those people who can handle it. Now, I've had customers who told me turn it off. Now, I'll tell you why they told me to turn it off. They said because they had people who were putting notes and they're not conscientious enough to know where the notes are being placed, and they'll put them in the wrong order or in the wrong employee file or in the wrong customer file or the wrong claims number or whatever and it became an issue, right? So it's great that you have multiple forms open, the same form over and over again, but you have to be cognizant of where you're typing and which one are you working with. So it's not for everybody. And so usually what I do is I educate my customers. Says, look, we can improve productivity by allowing you to open multiple orders or multiple invoices and be able to be more productive, right? And I talked to them about the example. Somebody, I'm in the thick of this order. Somebody calls me, asks me about another order. And I walk them through the sequence of events. I have to close the order, search for it, and all that. So it really is something that you have to educate them on, but it can definitely improve on productivity. Now, having said that, this is a very simple form, right? So if I spawn 20, 30 of these, it's no big deal because there's no tab control, but you know as well as I do that order forms can be most likely have a tab control, can be complex, lots of data that's querying the backend database. And if you're not careful, you'll run out of memory, especially if you're on the 32-bit version of Office. Because the 32-bit version of Office can only access how much memory? How much RAM can 32-bit Office access? Anybody know the answer? How much RAM? If you got a 16 gigabyte RAM on your computer, how much of those 16 gigabytes can Office do 32-bit? Anybody? 4 gigabytes max. So it doesn't matter if you have 16 gigabytes, you only do 4. If it's 64-bit Office, it can handle almost all of it, all 16 gigabytes. So you gotta be cognizant of the fact that make sure you're doing a 64-bit. Otherwise, you limit how many of these spawns you can do. But this is another great example of leveraging the object model in Access to be more productive, right? To make it much more easier to manage things. So I spawn this form. The other thing you can spawn is command buttons. Back in the day when we didn't have a calendar control like we do now, it was really popular to use a form that had a button for each day of the month. You remember those, George?
Yes, not fondly,
Now
but
we have the
yes.
calendar control. But when you've got 31 buttons on a form, some of them you got to turn off, some you got to turn on based on if it's February or if it's a leap year, what have you. It just becomes a pain. The other way you can spawn things is command buttons, right? Is to maybe you want to launch the same command button with different flavor or something. You don't want to have it designed on the form, what have you. I've never had to do that, right? But you could spawn anything in Access: command buttons, text boxes, labels. You can spawn them on the same form. So I can, in theory, spawn this button over and over again on this form. What I've used spawning for is for multiple forms. Now, George, you had a question. Go ahead and shoot.
Uh, well, I was going to say the with buttons on forms and things, you have a lifetime limit, I believe, of 755 on a form, and then it will not accept anymore. So you have to be
Well, that's
judicious.
different, right? That's different. We're talking about, in that case, that's a good point, right? In that case, you have an upper limit how many forms you can have in a database file, right? So
No,
that's this over here.
no, how many objects you can have on a form? How many controls?
Oh, I make a choice. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
I think it's lifetime limit. I mean, it's either 750 or 755.
I see.
So
Okay.
if you're, I would just say if you're going to use that approach, you'd want to be. Actually, it would work well with what you're doing here, though. You spawn a form, put controls on it because they're gone when you close that form. So
Yeah, yeah.
a
So
combination
that's
of.
another thing. That's another thing. This is a little different, right? I can't just use a close button, the regular close button, because when you hit close, you say do command that close me that name, it's going to close all of them because they're all called the same name. They're all called fr spawn, right? So what we do is we use the index property. We create a unique index number for each object in memory because these are all objects in memory. And then when we do the close button, it's actually doing that. The other thing is, if you notice, if I right click here, put this in the zone, there's no design menu, right? Because it's a form that's been cloned. None of these, I believe this one's the first one. None of these allow me to edit, right? They're all spawn. If I want to edit, I got to go to the original object. That's over here, click on design view. And that closes all the other objects in memory. But this is the one I want to use to manage this. So this also is quite interesting technique. And I urge you guys to consider playing with this. George, have you ever had a chance to use this in any of the program projects you worked on?
I don't think I've ever seen it before.
What? Wow, mind blown.
Yeah, so I learned something new tonight.
Oh, okay. Very nice. All right. Anybody else had a chance to use this in their project work? All right, let me see. I had the chat window up, and now it's not up there anymore. Does it work with AC? Yes, Alphonse, it does work with ACCDE because and that's a great example. When ACCDE, a lot of people use a technique where they duplicate the form in design view, right, or modify the form in design view, and then they save the form, then they launch it. Where you see this flicker happening, but you can't do that in ACCDE now, can you? So with ACCDE, you can spawn the form, and then it allows you to how can I say this? It allows you to change the design by removing buttons, adding buttons, and so forth. So it's just really a great way to get around that ACCDE problem.
Yeah.
Dale says, my mic is not working, but no, I've never seen the spawn feature. Wow. I thought
Yeah.
you guys were pros at this stuff. I am glad I showed you. You know, usually I'm learning from you guys. So I'm glad that I finally I'm teaching you guys something new. You know, Dale Fi, by the way, is the president of Access Eastern, Access User Group Eastern. So welcome, Dale. Thank you so much for being here. Alphonse, I believe, is in Italy. Right, Alphonse? So thank you so much for being here. Let me know in the comments if you're from Italy, I believe. All right. Go questions. All right. Let me see something here. Participants. How many? Let's see participants. Here we go. All right. Here we go. Okay. Cesardo is for the Philippines. Welcome, Cesardo. Let me know in the chat. Oh, you're in New Jersey. Okay, sorry about that, Alfonso. I'm confusing with somebody else. Sorry about that. We had a chap here who would join us from Italy at 2 in the morning. Chuck, have you ever had a chance to see this for a spawning feature? Chuck might be busy right now and may not be able to reply. All right. So I'm also going to provide you this file, right? So let's take a look at some of this code. Spawn is using event properties. Okay. So here is using the subroutine spawn form. So let's take a right click on that, select definition. Oh, remember the keys I was telling you about? This is the keys, right? It assigns a key to each form so it knows which one to close. All right, so the spawn forms, let me just way too much media window here. This is a lot more code than the first example we have. But basically, we have a class called CLS spawn. And we use a class to keep track of the keys every spawn object. And from there, we have the class, remove the object from memory when you hit the close form, or instantiate a new version of it, and so forth. All right, so for each form and forms, if FRM caption equals str caption, then set focus. All right, so basically, here's the thing about this. Why are we doing this? Well, if I already have that order open, right, order number 2204, which is in the caption properties, and I go to the search form, I forgot I have it open, I go to the search form, back to my search form, I click to open that order. Well, instead of opening the same order again, it checks the caption property in every form in memory, and if it finds it, it sets that focus and says, hey, here it is, here's the order form, right? So we don't want to reopen the same form in two windows. That would create too much havoc. Then we use the temp bars to say launch form, and then we use the caption property here, and we use the class to create the form. Now this method, let's take a look at this create form method. So now I'm in the class itself, CLS spawn. And here in this method, I'm down here, create form. Unlock or error, go to class initialize error, then message a string, if I'm visible true. This form, if I'm visible true, this class ID is initialized. I think this is an older version because I think what this is doing is when we first started down this journey, we would have this form invisible, right? So we would have this original form invisible. We would load it invisible and then we would clone it. Once the next iteration of this code is a lot better because it you don't have to have it in memory. So I'm not going to give you this version. This is an older version. I'll give you a more optimized version for you guys. So in order to get this, I really want to only give this to the people who showed up today. So email me at jsoto@itinpet.com. I'll send you a private link so you can download this once it becomes available. So jsoto@itinpet.com. I'll do that. And if you're on YouTube and you reach this far in the video, I'll send it to you too. So anybody who's on YouTube that's listening to this video got this far, I appreciate you hanging around this long. I will also send this to you if you email me at jsoto and say, Juan, can I have the spawn file? And we might devote more time to this next month because I think it's a great example. It's a wonderful feature. It's not used as much. We'd love to see it more happening now that we're moving to 64-bit because with 32-bit performance is just iffy, right? You can open 2 or 3 forms and that's it. With the new version, you can limit also how many forms you can open so people don't go wild. Because who has not have a user that's got 1,000 icons on their desktop, or has 100 tabs open in their browser, right? Raise your hand if you have ever seen somebody like that. Well, these are the same people who open 20 order forms, right? And so we have a limiter on there, and the new code does. So let me not give you this one. Let's wait until next month where we'll cover this topic in much more detail using the optimized code. And if you come next month, you'll also get a copy of the code so you can start using this concept. We have a class called Spawn Factory that we'll have to get into. It's pretty complex stuff, but it's very easy to use and pretty powerful. Okay. Juan, can you also post an AUG menu, which is where I generally put my database? Okay, sure. So this one I'm not going to post. I'll post the other one, FR menu, the one that does the little simple menu thing. But this one I won't post because I know we have a better version of this, and I wanted to bring this up an extreme example how you can use the object model of Access to be able to leverage that to be able to do advanced techniques like this. And we're going to go over the pros and cons in more detail. So looking forward to that discussion. All right. Any questions before we go? Any comments, questions? You guys like today's meeting? By the way, I want to let you know. Go ahead, George. I'm sorry.
I was going to say it's fascinating. I do have one question. Have you compared this between tab forms and overlapping windows? Which one works better with this technique?
I think tab forms. I'm a big fan of tab forms, right? I just am. It will work with overlapping windows. We can probably do that test next month, but I know for sure it works with anything. Because at the basic level, that's what the users are using. They're interacting with forms, right? So you, in theory, can spawn forms. You can also spawn tab controls and the same form, what have you. Now, one of the things that we do is we load tabs on demand. That's another advanced technique. Stop me if you have heard this before, but if you have customers complaining about a form that takes too long to load, or it's really slow, and you've got like 10 or 12 tabs, and I'm guilty of this just like anybody else. I love using the tab control, and I'll have. Let me show you. Let me show you an example of the tab control. This is a standard demo that we show potential customers. Show the sample demo. So I'm gonna bring up here customer record. Look at this. I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. I got proposals tab. I got an orders tab. Now this one's empty. I picked a customer that doesn't have much. Let me see if I can find a customer that does have a lot of orders and stuff like that. I know this guy, Thompson, Wheeler, and Young. All right. So look at this. I got all these contacts. I got all these proposals and all these orders. And
We're not seeing shared anymore.
Ah, okay. All right. Sorry about that. Thank you, Dale, for letting me know. All right. So I got this company center concept here, right? I've started with contacts and I got proposals I submitted. So we call this a 360 view of the customer record, right? So when I use this to sell our services, right? This is an example I use to sell my services. And you should always have great examples to sell people because they just don't know, right? They've never seen, a lot of times when people call you, they've never seen a professionally done access system. They just never have, right? So so I got these tab controls, and invariably what will happen is I get calls that's slow and this and that. So what happens is that on the on-click event of the other tabs, right? So right now I'm in proposals. When I click on orders, it'll actually unload the proposals tab, that form, that subform there. It'll set it to nothing, and then it will set this order subform to something else. So if I put this in design view, these tabs, each one of these tabs are subforms, right? And so I will unload, I'll come in here and I'll say data. All right, let me see if I can do that here. So see this, we'll wipe this clean. And when we wipe it clean, no, it's nothing. So if it's nothing, it's not going to requery, it's not going to hold back data, right? And so we found this way of being able to work much more optimally when you have a lot of tabs. So you can set the property of the subform and that tab to nothing, and then bring it back. So this is probably something we'll just see. Right now, next month is March, and the one after is April. So maybe in April we can talk about this technique. Have you ever used this technique of unloading subforms, George?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The first time I did a migration to SQL Azure to get it to work acceptably, this is what we had to do. Exactly this.
Good. Dale says he's got a customer's got 12 tab controls. Wow. I'm not worthy.
Have you ever done it with just a single subform control and load the different subforms into that same subform control
Not
without
that way,
tabs?
because usually you want the tabs to mean something, right? So we want them to be able to go to the, oh, I want to see orders. Okay, I'm gonna go on the orders tab. I want to see proposal. I need to go to proposals tab. And so it's hard to be able to differentiate that usage when you only have one tab. All right, our time has come to an end. I'm going to have to leave you guys. This was thank you so much for again showing up. And please email me if you want the FRM menu example. And next month we'll go in more detail on that spawning. So I'm not going to send you that, but next month you will walk away. I promise you will walk away with a great file with all the code and everything you do, so you can start implementing spawning in your particular file. This has been Juan Soto, president of SQL Server with Access Group, AccessUserGroups.org, direct from the Caribbean. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month in March, the second Tuesday in March. Thank you very much,
Good
everyone.
night. Good
Thank you.
night.
Night.
Good night.